Well, we're very lucky to have Nick Earls in our store today. Thank you for coming along to Sydney, all the way from Brisbane.
It's good to see you.
Nick's the author of many children's books, but the one we'll be looking at today is his new book called The Word Hunters, A Curious Dictionary, which he has written and Terry Widborn has illustrated. So, Nick, tell us a little about your book.
Well, Word Hunters, the idea came along a few years ago when I realised some words had really interesting stories behind them. Many words don't. Many words have relatively straightforward lives, but some have great stories behind them. And then there was one time when I was with friends, we'd been climbing a mountain, we were cooking dinner afterwards, and someone said something was okay, and Terry Widborn happened to be there, and he said, "Where does okay come from anyway?" And it was like my big moment of nerd glory because I knew where okay came from. And so we stopped cooking dinner, and suddenly I just turned my friends into my audience and got right into this and talked about the US presidential election of 1840 and Martin Van Buren, who was known as Old Kinderhook, which was abbreviated to OK, and the role that played in it. And I didn't know everything about it then, but I knew that, and I knew it had a great story. So I just had to tell it. And things like that stuck in my head, and I kept wanting to do more with them, and then I thought, it's not the kind of thing that I usually get to write about, but it wouldn't go away. The idea wouldn't go away, and I thought, what I want to do is come up with an adventure story with kids in it, going into the past to the various steps in the evolution of a word and discovering that. And then I got Terry involved, and we came up with a mechanism that would allow them to do it, and I got myself a better broadband connection and got to race around finding out thousands of things about the stories behind words and the details of the places and times they would go to, and it put me in a much better position to write the story.
See, that's a bit of cheating because your characters aren't allowed to use Google or an internet connection when they're on their adventures, are they?
No, they're not. They're not allowed to do that when you're in the past, but they can do it when they get home to check where they've been and see if they can find any background to it. And in fact, I kind of had to do that because there were some things that they discovered in the past that needed a bit more explanation, and sometimes they're concentrating so hard on staying alive and trying to solve the puzzle of what happened to the word in that time that they don't actually get to think it all through until they get home. But I've got to say, it was an asset having the internet at my fingertips and being able to look at the stories behind hundreds, if not thousands, of words in order to choose the ones that I settled on for this and for the next two books, and getting to find out all the great little bits of history that I can work in there while coming up with this adventure story.
So you did focus on a couple of, a few words in particular, or words or symbols. They were water, hello, and the symbol ampersand?
Yes.
Why did you choose those in particular?
Well, hello seemed like a good one to start with. It seemed like the ideal word to start with, and it's got a great story behind it. It's contested as to exactly where hello began as a word, but there are a number of stories that are plausible, and I went with one that's certainly plausible and is actually really interesting and goes back to Normandy in the 10th century. But people generally accept that the first step happened in the 1870s when the phone was being invented, and even it is interesting if there was nothing more to it than that. So what you've got in the 1870s is you've got inventors trying to invent loads of things and beat each other to it, things that became everyday things in the 20th century and that we've long taken for granted, the phone being one of them. So you've got Thomas Edison trying to invent it, Alexander Graham Bell trying to invent it, each of them inventing different bits. Edison inventing the mouthpiece bit, I think, and Alexander Graham Bell inventing the earpiece bit, so each of them gets to kind of stake some claim to it. But then each of them got to think, what happens when the thing rings and you answer it? And this is the thing we all take for granted because we've always lived with phones, but before there were phones, we had to work out how to answer the phone. And they thought, if you pick it up, there'll just be silence on the end. So someone's got to say something. And it's not like meeting someone in the street and you say good morning and whatever. So how do we handle that? And so they came up with different things. Thomas Edison decided on hello. Alexander Graham Bell decided on ahoy. And if he'd been the winner, we'd all be saying ahoy now and thinking that was a totally normal way to say hello rather than a word used by pirates. and yet they actually come from the same sorts of origins. They're both words that were shouted from the bows of ships in fog to avoid colliding with other ships. So you'd shout, ahoy! Or you'd shout, hello! And then other people would hear you and you'd be able to avoid the collision. And I think whatever else happened before that, that alone is a really interesting thing for a word that we take completely for granted and use all the time, and yet it came from somewhere. Then you've got the word water, which has a history that's thousands of years old and has hardly changed. A number of our words for things that were around thousands of years ago, some of them are close to the words we used for them thousands of years ago. So I wanted to have that in there. And then when it came to the ampersand, how these kids find themselves in the past is they find a book, which in the time they find it is called Walker and Fuller's Curious Dictionary, and it sends them off first to track down the history of hello, and then the history of water, and then the history of the elements in its title. And one of those is the ampersand. And I only learned in researching this book that it was often treated as the 27th letter of the alphabet in the 19th century. And it was the and symbol was there, and it comes from being and per se and, because if you said the alphabet in the 1830s, where if you'd say A, which could be a letter, you would say per se A, meaning A standing alone being a letter. So that's where we get the word ampersand. And there's more with Walker and Fuller as well, because our names come from very interesting places too. So there were some great things that I unearthed that I just had to include.
Collaborated with other authors before, but this is the first time you collaborated with an illustrator, is that right?
Yes, it is. It is. And there are some great illustrators out there, but this is the first thing that Terry got signed up to do. And I knew about Terry because we'd worked together in advertising, and I'd seen his art, I'd seen his website, theseventhworld.com, and his stuff is amazing. And I looked at this stuff, and here's this guy working in advertising, doing really well in advertising, but what he's really wanted to do is write children's books. And I looked at his stuff and thought, given the chance, Terry could be the next Sean Tan. I think he's really good. And so I thought, I want to do something with him now that I've got something that needs illustrations, and I hope we'll see lots more of him in the years to come, doing a whole lot of different things.
He'll help you with the next 2 books, of course, and that'll be big things to come.
That's right, he's working on the illustrations for book 2 at the moment, just as I've been writing book 3, and it's been nice to actually do that as a collaborative thing as well, so that Terry's ideas are in there very much as well. It's not like I have the ideas, write the book, and then walk out of the room and Terry walks in and draws pictures. We actually do talk about it beforehand, so that with book 3 I realised there was some new gadget we needed for book 3 that has to do this particular thing that I won't give away just yet. And so I said to Terry, here's what I've just written about this gadget. Can you tell me what the gadget looks like and how it works? And so Terry went to work, emailed me back a sketch of the gadget and said, okay, here, and you turn this and you do this, and then this becomes this. And I thought, that's what I need. So then I could just go and write that in to the story. So it's great having him there as the kind of gadget guy and the guy who finds more stuff than I've been able to find. So for example, in the second book, there's a scene in Chicago in 1929, and Lexi and Al land on a rooftop, and so you can kind of see the Chicago cityscape, and Terry worked out that the Hindenburg visited Chicago in 1929. So I thought, great, let's have the Hindenburg in there. So it was great him making those discoveries as well along the way.
Sounds like you had a lot of fun writing it.
Yeah, we did.
Now, I heard a very good story about you once upon a time being a story chair. This was a job that you had. Can you tell us the story of the story chair?
Yes, I can. It was a long, long time ago, children. It was 1989, when I was young enough to win an award with Young in the title. My songwriting partner of the time and girlfriend of the time and I in Brisbane won the 1989 Shell Warana Young Performers Award at Brisbane Spring Festival. And what that meant was we had to perform, and it was easy for Karen since she was a singer and a pianist and could do all kinds of things. She's now the Australian voice of satellite navigation systems the world over. So she's in 25 million people's cars at the very least.
Wow.
And, yeah, and if you send text messages to landlines using Telstra, it's her voice that they're setting. So I have friends doing that now to me, and it's her, and I know her, so it's kind of odd. But back then we were winning the Shell Variety Young Performers Award, and they had to work out what to do with me. And the first thought was that I would roam the Botanic Gardens in Brisbane with a big Akubra hat on and swinging corks and a beard and a swag under my arm, yarning to kiddies. And, you know, it's not me now. It was even less me then. And then they said, what about we just get you sitting in a big old armchair reading stories to children at your feet? And I thought that sounds vaguely creepy, and I don't know that I won't do that either. So to make the idea stop, I said, next you'll be suggesting I should dress up as the armchair and sit there with my head poking out the top, and my hands poking out the arms of the armchair, and some kid in my lap turning pages. And they went, yes, that's what we'll do. So I had to go home that afternoon and call my mother and ask her if she could make a storytelling armchair costume. And my mother would keep giving me updates over the next few weeks, and she'd call me and she'd say she'd just been down to Dollar Curtains and found this great kind of Disney knockoff curtain fabric and bought $1 worth of it and was making the chair for me. And she said, I've just made the cushions. I made 2 cushions, so you've got a spare. And I put a rubber lining in them just in case anyone gets a bit excited. And I thought, it's great when your mother thinks you've got the capacity to cause excitement, but that was not the kind of excitement I had in mind. So I did it, and I'd done medicine at that stage, so I was being a GP during the week, and then being a storytelling armchair on weekends. And there was one bizarre moment where my 2 jobs actually overlapped. I was sitting there with a 3-year-old in my lap turning the pages as I read Harry McClary from Donaldson's Dairy for the 5,000th time, doing my kooky Schnitzel von Kram with the very low Tom accent and all that, and 20 kids in front of me thinking this was normal. When I noticed a very large elderly woman just over to the left who wasn't doing so well, and I couldn't help but keep glancing over to her, and she was moving quite slowly, walking along, and she was looking around. And I thought, what's she looking for? And I was looking to see what she was looking for, and she was looking, and I was looking, and then I realised she's looking for somewhere to sit. And then I realised the nearest place to sit was a bench that was about 200 metres away. I thought, this is not going to a happy place. And she came over, and she looked down at me and looked at the kid in my lap and went, sorry, love, and turfed the kid from my lap and sat on me and squished me back. I was on like a tiny director's chair with this padded armchair costume and squished me back in this thing. And I was squished back so that my ear was pressed up against her chest, and I could hear the crackles in her chest when she breathed, and if I moved around I could see the pulse there flickering in her neck, and I could see her puffy ankles. I thought, this woman has several clear signs of inadequately treated heart failure, and someone had better do something about that. So I raised with her the possibility that she might have heart failure, and she said she did have diagnosed heart failure, and she'd just been to see her GP. The regular GP was away. She'd seen the locum had changed her medication, so I took a quick history, including a medication history, and at this stage the kids are going, the show's not as good as it was before. Where's Harry McClary? Where's that kooky Schnitzel von Kram accent? Where's that gone? We've had enough of the old lady. So I took the history and realised that the new drug she'd been put on might have been conflicting with one of the old ones. Put that suggestion to her and said she should probably go and see her GP again and raise that. And then we both had this awkward moment when we realised that I was pretty much a disembodied head to her, sitting on the back of an armchair in the Botanic Gardens, dispensing medical advice. And she shook her head and she said, I didn't think they'd have a thing like this at Warana. What are you doing here? And that's why I thought, I can't be doing this. This is totally wrong. There's like people here. This is not a... So all I could do was go, I'm a storytelling armchair. And she shook her head and went, you must be the smartest storytelling armchair in the world. And then off she went when she'd sorted herself out. And I hope she went and got the problem fixed. So I like to think I did some good as the storytelling armchair. And then that costume went away for 23 years, only to have popped out very, very recently for me to wear at the 50th birthday of Brisbane Writers' Festival. And I have mentioned the story of the chair to some people before, and I recently noticed that it is in the script for the movie being adapted from my novel World of Chickens. It's not in the book. The book's fiction. And yet here's this book about a character who's not me being turned into a film that involves an incident from my life, and they've already asked if it's okay to use the actual storytelling armchair costume, because when they saw a photo they went, we couldn't even make one that ugly. So yes, we've got to have it. So hopefully we'll be seeing it all on the big screen in the not too distant future.